My neighbor befriended me and my kids and gained my trust as a babysitter, then secretly manipulated them into believing he was their father and tried to frame me for neglect to steal them. Now he's begging me to let him have his life back. The first thing I remember about Victor is his laugh. Loud, charming, just on the edge of annoying, the kind of laugh that made you feel like you were missing the punchline if you weren't smiling along. He showed up on our front lawn the day we moved in, a six-pack in one hand and a box of donuts in the other. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, extending the donuts like they were some kind of sacred peace offering. "Figured your hands are full, so I brought carbs and carbs. My name is Nathan. I'm 38. I work as a freelance IT contractor, and, more importantly, I'm a single dad to two kids, Ava, 8, and Ethan, 6. We had just moved into a modest ranch-style home in a quiet little suburb outside of Denver. It was supposed to be a fresh start after the divorce. Victor lived next door. Probably mid-40s, clean-shaven, always dressed like he was about to star in a barbecue commercial. Khakis, polo, the works. He was friendly, quick with jokes, and made a point to crouch down to my kids' level like they were the main event. "You guys like magic?" he asked Ethan and Ava that first afternoon. Their eyes lit up. Victor snapped his fingers and produced a quarter from behind Ethan's ear. Ava giggled. Ethan's jaw dropped. "I'll admit it was a good trick. Mind if I show them my garden sometime?" Victor asked me, standing up. "Got some strawberries in bloom. Kids love picking them." I was tired, sore from boxes and memories I hadn't fully unpacked yet. But I nodded. "Sure, that'd be nice." And just like that, Victor was in. It started small, a wave across the driveway, a quick chat while I unloaded groceries. Then he began showing up more often. He'd mow my front lawn without asking, bring over leftover lasagna. Always just happened to have extra ice cream when my kids were outside playing. Ethan and Ava loved him. Victor knew just how to talk to them, not like a parent, more like a fun uncle. He had a trampoline, a telescope, and a pet iguana named Dave. What kid wouldn't be obsessed? Victor says reptiles are misunderstood, Ava told me one night at dinner. Like people assume they're mean just because they don't smile. That gave me pause. Still, I appreciated the help. As a single parent, you take what you can get. When I had to run to the DMV unexpectedly, Victor offered to watch the kids. He did it with such ease that I didn't think twice. "They'll be fine. I'll even help them with homework," he'd said. He became our go-to babysitter. It wasn't until he started giving me parenting advice that I noticed something shifting. "You know, kids thrive with more structure," Victor said once while we stood in my kitchen. "Have you tried a behavior chart? Reward system?" I nodded politely. "We have one on the fridge." "Oh sure," he laughed. "But do you actually enforce it?" Ava said she didn't lose screen time when she skipped her chores last week. That made me blink. I hadn't realized he was keeping score. Another time, when I asked Ethan to put away his Legos before dinner, he pouted and said, "Victor lets us leave them out." I raised an eyebrow. "Victor doesn't live here, buddy." "Well, maybe you should," Ethan mumbled, barely loud enough for me to catch. That one stung. Victor was always there, offering advice I didn't ask for, making my kids laugh while I was stuck doing the boring stuff, baths, lunchboxes, bedtime routines. He got the fun, I got the discipline. I found myself resenting it, even as I told myself to be grateful. "Let me know if you need a night off," Victor said once with a grin. I love those kids like they're my own. At the time, I brushed it off. But deep down, I felt it. The line between neighborly kindness and something else was starting to blur. Ava and Ethan didn't just like Victor. They trusted him more than they trusted me. One night, I told Ava she couldn't have ice cream before bed. "Victor said sugar doesn't actually affect sleep," she said defiantly. "He's not your dad," I replied. She stared at me like I was the one who didn't get it. "But he said he kind of is. Like, part of our family now." I didn't sleep much that night. The fresh start I had imagined when we moved in was beginning to feel like something else, like I was being slowly replaced in my own home. I still told myself it was harmless, that Victor just wanted to help, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just being friendly. He was building something, and I was starting to realize I wasn't the one in control of it. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Parenting is hard enough without second-guessing every friendly gesture. But something about the way my kids started talking, the tone, the phrasing, it started to get under my skin. "Victor lets us stay up later," Ethan said one night when I told him to brush his teeth. I turned from the sink. "What? Like, when we have movie night at his house," he added. He said rules are flexible if the vibe is right. The vibe is right? My 6-year-old said that like he was quoting a TED Talk. Ava chimed in from the hallway. "Victor lets us have popcorn after 9. And he says it's okay to skip brushing your teeth once in a while." I stared at her. "That's not how we do things in this house." She shrugged. "I'm just saying what he said." They weren't being disrespectful. Not directly. But the seed had been planted. The unspoken comparison between my house and Victor's was growing, and I was losing. One Friday afternoon, I picked them up from his place after work. They came running out with big smiles, smelling like marshmallows and cinnamon. Victor made s'mores in the microwave, Ava grinned. We watched 2 movies. I glanced at the time. It's almost 10. Why didn't he put you to bed? Ethan giggled. He said sleep is overrated. Memories over schedules. Victor strolled out to meet me, his hands in his pockets, smiling like nothing was out of the ordinary. We got a little carried away. Hope you don't mind. Yeah, I said, forcing a polite smile. Just wish I'd known. He patted my shoulder. They were having so much fun, I couldn't say no. You know how it is. That was the beginning of it. A few days later, I found a bag of cookies in Ethan's backpack, the homemade kind Victor baked, triple chocolate chip with extra sugar. Victor made us a whole batch, Ethan explained. He said you don't bake fun stuff. I blinked. I made you cupcakes last week. Yeah, but those had bananas in them, Ava said, wrinkling her nose. They weren't being cruel. Just honest. But it felt like a punch anyway. That night, I pulled Victor aside. Listen, I started carefully. I appreciate everything you've done for the kids. But could we keep the sugar and late nights to a minimum? I'm trying to keep things consistent at home. Victor nodded, but his smile didn't waver. Of course. I get it. I don't know. I see myself in them. And since I can't have kids of my own. His eyes got glassy for a moment. I hesitated. I'm sorry. I didn't know. He waved it off. No pity, please. Just saying, I care about them. Probably more than I should. You're doing great, by the way. I'm just here to fill in the gaps. Fill in the gaps. That phrase echoed long after I walked back home. I wanted to believe he meant well, but the way he said it made it sound like he was patching something broken, like I was incomplete. The next week, I told Ava she couldn't go to Victor's until she finished her science project. She frowned. But Victor said homework is busy work. He says real learning happens when you're curious. I paused. He said that. She nodded. He said school is too rigid. That kid should be free to explore. That night, I asked Ethan to clean up his Legos. He shook his head. Victor says mess means imagination. That was the moment I started to feel like a guest in my own house. One night, while I was helping Ethan with his reading, he looked up at me and said, Victor said he could be our dad if you ever got too tired. I stopped breathing for a second. What do you mean by that? I asked, keeping my voice calm. He shrugged. Nothing bad. Just that if you ever needed help being a dad, he could do it. Later that week, Ava dropped her own little bombshell. Victor says you need to be more fun. Like, not so serious. Maybe then we'd listen more. I felt like a chalkboard someone else had started erasing. Victor wasn't yelling. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't even raising his voice. He was just there, making jokes, baking cookies, offering alternatives, slowly becoming their favorite voice in the room, the one they started echoing instead of mine. I still told myself it was nothing. He was just helping. He was just trying to be kind. He was just Victor. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the lights were out, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing something. Not all at once, but inch by inch. And the worst part? My kids didn't even see it happening. I decided to invite Victor over for dinner. I told myself it was about boundaries, about clearing the air. But deep down, I think I just wanted to look him in the eye and understand what the hell was happening to my family. I made spaghetti, Ava's favorite, and garlic bread from scratch. I even bought those fizzy apple drinks Ethan liked, thinking it might set the tone for something civil, something honest. Victor showed up 5 minutes early, like always, with a bottle of wine in one hand and a board game under his arm. Game night after dinner? He asked, flashing that familiar smile. The kids are obsessed with this one. Ava and Ethan squealed the moment he walked in. Victor. Ethan ran to him like I wasn't even in the room. Ava followed, already pulling him toward the living room. Can we show you the painting I made? You're gonna love it. Victor tousled Ethan's hair, then turned to me with a warm grin. Hope you don't mind. I brought dessert too, s'mores dip. I forced a smile. Thanks. Dinner's almost ready. As we sat down at the table, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, the way the kids' posture changed around him. Straighter. Livelier. Like they were trying to impress him. The conversation was light at first. Victor told a story about a raccoon that had been raiding his trash cans, and the kids laughed so hard Ethan nearly choked on his pasta. I chuckled too, mostly out of habit. But then I tried steering the conversation. Hey, I said, glancing at Victor, after dinner, you and I should talk. Just for a bit. He blinked, smile intact. Sure, but let's keep the kids around. Yeah? No need to hush them out. We're all friends here. I hesitated. It's more of a grown-up conversation. Ethan immediately looked anxious. Are we in trouble? No, buddy. Not at all. Victor waved it off. It's fine. They can stay. Besides, if it's about them, shouldn't they be part of it? That stopped me cold. I watched as Ava looked back and forth between us, reading the shift in energy. I saw it on Victor's face too, that small edge, the way he suddenly took up more space at the table. I just wanted to talk about boundaries, I said. I think we need to be clearer about routines and expectations, especially around bedtime and rules. Victor tilted his head, looking almost amused. Oh, I thought we were on the same page. We're not, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The kids are getting confused. About rules, about who's in charge. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms folded loosely. I'm not trying to step on your toes, Nathan. I just care about them. Deeply. And sometimes I see gaps that need a little support. Ethan piped up. He helps us when you're too tired. Ava nodded. And he listens more. I swallowed hard. I do my best. But it gets harder when I feel like my voice isn't being backed up. Victor chuckled lightly, as if I had just said something overly dramatic. Come on, man. You're a great dad. But every parent needs backup. He turned to the kids. Right, guys? Teamwork makes the dream work. They both nodded enthusiastically. I felt like I was on the outside of some inside joke. Victor lifted his glass. To teamwork. Ava clinked hers against his. Ethan followed. I didn't move. I sat there, watching my kids toast with a man who wasn't their father, but was slowly becoming the one they turned to first. You know what Victor said? Ava began suddenly. That sometimes dads can be too busy to notice when kids are sad. But he said that's okay, because it's not their fault. Victor shot her a quick look, but she kept going. And that some dads do their best, but other people can help too. I turned to him sharply. Did you really say that? He raised his hands innocently. We were talking about feelings. I was trying to be helpful. Helpful isn't undermining me in my own house. There was a long silence. Victor set down his glass and stared straight at me. Nathan, I'm not trying to replace you. But let's be honest, these kids need more than just structure. They need connection. And sometimes, structure gets in the way of that. He said it so calmly, so convincingly, like he'd practiced it. I connect with my children just fine, I said, my jaw tight. Ava looked at her plate. Ethan stared at the tablecloth. Victor let the silence stretch, then smiled. I'm not your enemy, he said. I'm just here when they need someone. He turned to Ava. Want to set up the board game? She nodded quickly, sliding out of her chair without looking at me. Ethan followed. And just like that, Victor stood up and left me sitting alone at the dinner table, spaghetti going cold. My kids chose him. Not because they didn't love me, but because he made it easier. He made them feel like they didn't have to choose. I sat there for a long time, listening to them laugh from the living room. Victor's voice carried above theirs, directing the game, calling the rules, making more jokes. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't wanted to believe. This wasn't about boundaries. This was about control. And I was already losing it. It was almost midnight when I heard Victor's voice through the window. I was sitting at my desk, staring blankly at a spreadsheet I hadn't touched in an hour. The kids were asleep. The house was quiet. But then I heard that laugh, the same one I'd heard 100 times before, but this time it didn't sound warm. It sounded smug. His back porch light was on. The sliding door opened just enough for sound to drift across the narrow gap between our houses. He was on the phone, pacing. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, not at first. But his tone stopped me cold. He's clueless. Still thinks I'm doing him a favor. I froze. Victor's voice dropped lower, but it was still clear enough. Just a few more months before they're mine. My heart started pounding. I leaned toward the window, holding my breath. The little girl's already half convinced I care more than he does. And the boy, he worships me. It's too easy. Silence. Then he laughed again. It wasn't loud this time. It was slow, drawn out, like he was savoring it. Once the testimony lines up, no judge is going to hand those kids back to a burnout dad who can't keep up. You should see his face when they side with me. It's pathetic. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Testimony? I shifted closer to the open window, careful not to make a sound. I didn't understand all of it yet, but I knew what I was hearing wasn't just some twisted brag. It was a plan. And it was about my kids. He doesn't see it. That's the best part. The man is drowning and still thinks he's steering the boat. By the time I'm done, he'll look unfit even to himself. I clenched the edge of the desk until my fingers went numb. Victor wasn't just manipulating my children. He was setting me up, framing me, making me look like a neglectful, overworked, detached father, all while sliding into their lives as the stable one, the trusted one, the better option. Once the school counselor gets that little nudge, Victor continued, and Ava starts talking about how sad her dad is. It'll all fall into place. I don't even have to lie. Just let the right things slip. My mouth was dry. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. I wasn't hearing speculation. I was hearing a man talk through the next steps of stealing my children. And hey, if he flips out, that just helps my case. Shows he's unstable. All I have to do is keep smiling. Be helpful. Be available. He paused again. Then came the last line. They're already halfway mine. Just a little longer. He hung up. I didn't move for a full minute. Eventually, I stood up and walked into the hallway, checking on the kids. Ethan was snoring softly. Ava was curled under her blankets, clutching the stuffed koala Victor had given her. They were safe. For now. But I wasn't. Because the man I had trusted, the man I had let into my home, my life, was planning to take everything from me. I stared at my reflection in the dark window. I looked tired, worn out, just like Victor had said. And that scared me more than anything. Because if I could see it, a judge could too. Victor had planted the story. All he needed now was a few more moments, a few more stumbles from me, to make it stick. And the worst part? He almost had me convinced. For weeks I'd been doubting myself, wondering if I was too uptight, too rigid, not fun enough. Maybe I was the problem. But now I knew better. This wasn't about being a better parent. This was about control. This was about obsession. And if I didn't act fast, he'd get exactly what he wanted. By morning, I had a list. Hidden cameras, audio recorders, backup storage, legal consultation, discreet, for now. Victor played the long game, but I had finally woken up. And now it was mine to play smarter. Because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. No one was going to believe me over him without proof. Victor was too good at this. Too polished. Too charming. He'd spun himself into the perfect neighbor, the guy who helped with groceries, who baked cookies, who coached kids through tough emotions. If I stood in court today and said he was trying to steal my children, I'd look paranoid. Bitter. Crazy. But facts don't lie. So I got to work. While the kids were at school, I installed small cameras in the living room, hallway, and even the kitchen, anywhere Victor tended to linger when he babysat. I kept the angles wide but subtle. Nothing that could be spotted at a glance. I bought 2 voice recorders, one small enough to hide in the bookshelf, another that could fit inside one of the kids' toy bins. I set up a folder on my laptop labeled Home Finances and encrypted the real files beneath it. I watched tutorials on spotting gaslighting tactics. Read articles on psychological manipulation. Each one hit a little too close. The late-night desserts, the backhanded compliments, the quiet contradictions of my rules, they weren't accidental. They were building blocks. Victor was slowly rewriting how my kids saw me. Not by force, but by preference. By comparison. And it was working. But not anymore. I texted him later that day. Would you mind watching Ethan and Ava tomorrow night? I've got a work emergency. He replied in less than a minute. Victor, absolutely. You know I love those 2. I stared at the screen. I bet you do. The next evening, I kept it casual. Wore my usual hoodie, acted stressed like I was juggling a deadline. The kids were thrilled when Victor arrived. They jumped into his arms like I didn't exist. He laughed and gave Ava a piggyback ride straight into the kitchen. Take your time, he told me. We're gonna do a creativity night. I nodded. Appreciate it. And with that, I stepped out the door and drove 2 blocks down, looping around until I could watch the house from a quiet side street. My phone was synced to the motion alerts. Every 15 minutes, I refreshed the camera feed. Victor moved through the house like he owned it. He made popcorn, pulled out art supplies, read a story out loud with exaggerated voices. And then, somewhere between making Ava laugh and getting Ethan to draw a family portrait, he started talking. You know, guys, his voice came through the tiny speaker in my hand. Families come in all kinds of shapes. Sometimes people realize the people who really care about them aren't the ones they were born to. Sometimes it's the ones who show up. A pause. Ava, like you. Victor, exactly. Ethan, but Daddy shows up. Victor's voice softened, but it turned colder too. He tries. But he's tired a lot. Sometimes people get stuck being adults and forget how to really be there. Another pause. You 2 deserve someone who doesn't just mean well, but who understands you. He said it like he was comforting them. Like he was their savior. I watched in stunned silence as he leaned over and helped Ethan color in a figure labeled Victor under the word family. My chest burned with something between fury and heartbreak. He was rehearsing the script, rehearsing the bond. And tomorrow or next week or next month, when someone official asked the kids who made them feel safe, he wanted them to say him. I waited until they were asleep before I came back. Victor met me at the door, all smiles. They were angels. I let them fall asleep on the couch while watching nature documentaries. Hope that's okay. Yeah, I said, pretending to yawn. Thanks again. I owe you. He gave me a wink. You already pay me in hugs. I smiled, then locked the door after he left. The footage was saving to the cloud. The audio was crisp. And with every word he spoke, I felt my strength return, not just as a father, but as someone finally taking back control. I didn't know what the next step would be yet, but I knew this. Victor wasn't just a bad influence. He was a predator, and I was done letting him write the story. The night of the trap, I played my role perfectly. I made sure the house looked slightly disorganized, left laundry out, kept my laptop open with too many tabs to give the impression of a frazzled single dad just trying to keep up. When Victor rang the doorbell, I opened it with a tired smile. Appreciate you coming again, I said, rubbing my eyes. Work's been chaos. No worries, he said, stepping inside. You do what you gotta do. I've got the fun stuff covered. He gave Ethan a fist bump and ruffled Ava's hair. They lit up instantly. I made a point to stay passive, quiet. I didn't want to raise suspicion. I needed Victor to relax, to let his guard down. He started in on the kids almost right away, complimenting their drawings, laughing at every little thing they said. Then, with that same subtle edge I'd started to recognize, he pivoted. Looks like someone forgot to brush their hair today, he said to Ava with a teasing grin. You're lucky I don't let my daughter, if I had one, leave the house like this. Ava laughed but tugged self-consciously at her hair. Victor, I said, trying to keep it light, we don't need to comment on their looks. He raised his hands. Hey, just trying to help. Kids need guidance. A little while later, he told Ethan that his jeans were too short and that someone needs to buy you clothes that actually fit, little man. I bit my tongue. The hidden microphone in the corner of the room caught everything. I leaned on the kitchen counter, trying to appear casual. Been thinking, actually, I said, stirring a cup of coffee. Maybe it's time we moved. I saw a place closer to the city. Better schools. Smaller yard, but... Victor froze mid-reach for a board game. Wait, what? He tried to laugh, but it came out tight. You're moving. I nodded. Could be good for us. Fresh start. You sure the kids would like that? His tone changed, just a bit. I'd make sure they're okay, I said. We'd figure it out. Victor set the game down slowly. I think you're making a mistake. That caught me off guard. He didn't even try to mask it. I mean, he continued, adjusting his posture, these kids have structure here. Support. Me, even. That kind of consistency's important. I looked at him. You think you're that important to them? He shrugged, too casually. Ask them. They know who really listens. Who really shows up. Ethan and Ava were in the next room, still in earshot. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You're overstepping. You know that, right? Victor didn't flinch. No, he said calmly. I'm stepping in. There it was. Just enough. You've been overwhelmed for months, he added. You're trying, sure, but they need more than someone who's just trying not to drown. I raised an eyebrow. That what you tell them? I tell them the truth, he said, with that maddening smile. That some people are meant to be parents. Others just end up with the title. He was pushing me hard, trying to provoke a reaction. One he could use. One that would make me look unstable. I stayed calm. So what's your plan? I asked, sipping my coffee. You just keep showing up until they forget who I am? He chuckled. They won't forget you. They'll just outgrow you. I held his gaze. You really believe that? His eyes hardened. They already have. Boom. That was it. The exact moment the switch flipped in him, when the mask slipped. He'd stopped pretending. No more playful jabs, no more helpful neighbor routine. He wanted control, and he didn't care how ugly it got. I leaned in slightly. You know this is all being recorded, right? He blinked. What? I pointed, casually, at the bookshelf. Then the light fixture. Then the stuffed bear on the couch. Smile, I said. You're finally telling the truth. His face changed. Like ice cracking under pressure. He took a step back. You're bluffing. I walked to my laptop and hit a key. Victor's voice filled the room. By the time I'm done, he'll look unfit even to himself. He lunged forward. Shut it off. I stepped between him and the computer. It's all saved. Off-site. You touch my kid's head one more time. I'll have you in cuffs before the sun comes up. He froze, chest heaving. His eyes darted toward the hallway, maybe calculating whether he could still talk his way out of it. But the performance was over. The trap was sprung. And the only thing left was for him to fall. The next morning, I called Maya. She was the only friend I had in town who'd seen things from the start, someone I trusted. She used to work as a family therapist before switching to school counseling, and when I told her everything, she didn't hesitate. You need to bring this to the authorities. Today, she said. But do it smart. Calm. Methodical. Let them see you're not reacting, you're documenting. With her help, I spent the day organizing the footage. We clipped Victor's statements, added timestamps, and included the recordings from the night he'd essentially confessed. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. The tone. The control. The implication that he had already shaped the kids' minds to align with his twisted version of truth. We arranged a meeting at Maya's house that evening. I asked Victor to stop by under the pretense of clearing the air. He agreed, as cocky as ever, texting back. Probably for the best. Let's work this out like adults. When he arrived, Maya met him at the door and welcomed him in like a guest. She played it cool, offering coffee. I stayed quiet. Calm. Professional. He sat down on the couch and looked at me like I was wasting his time. So? Are we doing this, or what? I opened my laptop and hit play. His own voice filled the room. Once the testimony lines up, no judge is going to hand those kids back to a burnout dad who can't keep up. He went still. Victor, I said, watching him closely, you lied. You manipulated my children. You inserted yourself into my family and then tried to erase me from it. I didn't, he started. But Maya raised a hand. Don't, she said. Her voice was sharp. Professional. You're not talking to Nathan. You're talking to a mandated reporter. And what I've seen and heard is enough for child welfare to get involved. Permanently. Victor's face dropped. He tried to smile. Okay, maybe I said some things, but it was never serious. Come on, you really think any of that would hold up? I was just venting. You were grooming them. I cut in. You crossed every boundary. You made my daughter question whether I was a good father. You made my son feel like he had to earn your approval just to feel okay. Victor stood up, suddenly tense. You're twisting this. You don't understand what those kids need. I was filling a void. They need structure. Affection. You're too busy playing house to actually be a father. Maya stood up too. That's enough. I pulled out the printed transcript from one of the recordings. This is already in the hands of a lawyer. And if you come near us again, even once, I'll make sure you're explaining yourself to a judge. Victor's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a split second, I saw the man behind the smile, angry, entitled, exposed. But then the doorbell rang. It was the police. I had already submitted the evidence that morning. The detective said they wanted to question him based on the audio files and multiple reports, including a letter Maya helped me write detailing psychological manipulation and coercion. Victor froze when he saw the uniforms. This is insane. One of the officers stepped forward. Sir, we'd like you to come with us. We've got some questions regarding possible custodial interference and emotional endangerment of minors. Victor looked at me one last time. It wasn't anger anymore. It was disbelief. Like he still couldn't fathom that I'd outplayed him. They took him without incident. And just like that, Victor, the man who once laughed on our porch and called my kids his little stars, was gone. I stood there for a long time after the door closed. Maya touched my shoulder. You did it. No, I said quietly. I protected them. That's all I ever wanted. The damage he'd done couldn't be undone in a day. But the spell was broken. Victor's reign over our lives was over. And for the first time in months, I felt like a father again. The fallout didn't feel like a victory. Not at first. Victor was gone, but the effects of his presence stayed behind, clinging to the walls like smoke. The kids didn't understand why he stopped coming over. At least not right away. Is he mad at us? Ava asked one morning, her voice small as she stared at her cereal. No, sweetheart, I said gently. Victor's just not going to be around anymore. That's all. Ethan frowned. But we didn't say goodbye. I knelt down beside him. You didn't do anything wrong, buddy. None of this is your fault. But they didn't believe that. Not yet. In the days that followed, the mood in the house changed. The laughter that used to echo from their rooms faded. They stopped asking for board games. The bedtime stories went quiet. Ava sulked. Ethan started acting out, nothing major, just more tantrums, more, why do I have to, more tears over small things. I tried to keep routine steady, but everything felt off balance. One night, I found Ava in her room, holding the stuffed koala Victor gave her. Do you miss him? She asked, not looking at me. I sat down on the floor beside her. I don't miss what he was doing. She turned to me confused. But he was nice. I sighed. He seemed that way. But sometimes people can act nice and still do things that hurt others. He was trying to take you, and Ethan, away from me. She blinked. What? He made you think I didn't care, I said softly. He made you question things I said, made me seem like the bad guy. That's not what friends do. That's not what family does. She was quiet for a long time. I thought he was helping. I know, sweetie, I said. That's what made it hard. That weekend, I called a child psychologist. Dr. Kendra Morris. Maya recommended her, said she'd worked with families in situations like ours. At first, the kids didn't want to go. We're not broken, Ethan said. You're not, I reassured him. But it's okay to talk to someone when things feel heavy. Even grown-ups need help sometimes. The first session was tough. Ava sat with her arms crossed. Ethan barely spoke. But Dr. Morris was patient. She talked to them like they were people, not problems. And little by little, they opened up. Week by week, I saw changes. Small ones. Ava stopped asking about Victor every night. Ethan started laughing again, not the loud, silly kind he used to do with Victor, but real, belly-deep giggles when I tickled him or made funny voices during bedtime stories. We started having movie nights again. Just the three of us. Popcorn in mismatched bowls, blankets piled on the couch, Disney reruns and Pixar tearjerkers. Ava would fall asleep leaning on my shoulder, and Ethan would climb into my lap halfway through the movie like he used to. One night, while brushing her teeth, Ava said, I think Victor liked the idea of us more than he liked us. I paused. What do you mean? She shrugged. He always wanted us to say he was the best. He made it feel like, if we didn't love him more than you, we were doing something wrong. My heart ached hearing that. You never had to choose, I said. Not then, not now. But I'm really proud of you for saying that. She nodded slowly. I don't like how he made me feel special. It was like he needed it. All the time. After that, the healing picked up speed. We went back to the little park near our house. The one Victor used to coincidentally show up at. The kids were hesitant at first, but we stayed. We brought snacks and a frisbee and stayed until sunset. Eventually, the house began to feel like ours again. Not a battlefield. Not a project. Not a house that needed fixing, just a home, lived in and imperfect. The nightmares stopped. The arguing slowed. One morning, I found Ethan asleep in my bed, curled up next to me, holding my old hoodie like a security blanket. He hadn't done that since before we met Victor. I didn't move. I just stayed there, listening to his breathing, knowing that for all the damage that had been done, this was the sound of something being rebuilt, slowly, but truly. They were healing. And so was I. A year later, we were somewhere else entirely, physically, emotionally, all of it. I'd found a place on the edge of Fort Collins. A quiet cul-de-sac, smaller yard, bigger sky. The new house didn't have history creeping through the walls. No echoes of Victor's laugh, no memories of him handing out dessert behind my back. It was just ours. Ethan had taken to the move better than I expected. He joined a Lego club at his new school and made 2 friends in the first week. Ava took a little longer. She still had moments, like when we passed a man in khakis with a warm smile and she went quiet, but she bounced back faster now. More grounded. Stronger in herself. We saw Dr. Morris for 6 more months. She helped them make sense of things in ways I never could. She helped me too, though I didn't sit on the couch and talk like they did. She just gave me the right tools. The right words. And somewhere in that time, we became a solid little trio again. No triangle. No intruder. Just a dad and his kids. Still, I didn't let anyone new in for a while. Not in a real way. Casual conversations at drop-off, polite smiles with other parents at school events, that was my limit. I kept walls up without realizing it. Then came Haley. She was a science teacher at Ethan's school. 35, smart in a way that didn't make you feel stupid. I met her during a field trip chaperone meeting. She made a joke about forgetting her coffee and offered to share her granola bar like it was currency. We talked for 5 minutes. Then again the next week at the school carnival. She was patient. Funny. Asked about Ava's reading interests and remembered to follow up the next time we spoke. It was easy. Still, I didn't know how to let her in. Not after what had happened. The first time I told her about Victor, I kept it light. We had a neighbor who got too close. Took a while to untangle that. I expected her to nod awkwardly and change the subject. She didn't. She asked, gently, too close how? And I told her. Not all of it. But enough. She didn't look at me like I was weak or overprotective. She looked at me like she understood. Then she said, you kept them safe. That's what matters. We didn't rush. I didn't bring her around the kids for months. I didn't even let her into the house until I felt ready. Not because she gave me any reason to worry, but because I learned what it meant to trust someone again. When I did finally introduce her, Ava was cautious. Ethan was quiet. But Haley didn't push. She just smiled and asked if they wanted to help her pick toppings for homemade pizzas. 2 weeks later, Ava showed her a book she was writing for fun. Ethan asked if she wanted to play the dinosaur card game. It wasn't a replacement. It wasn't meant to be. It was something new. And this time, I was the one leading the way. We had our rituals again: Friday night movies, Sunday pancakes, puzzles on rainy days. Victor still popped into my head sometimes, like a scar you forget is there until the weather shifts. But he didn't control the room anymore. He didn't control anything. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I stood outside on the porch with Haley. The stars were faint, but they were there. I used to be scared I'd never get it back, I said quietly. The trust. The normal. She took my hand. But you did. And she was right. We still had hard days. That didn't change. Parenting never stops being hard. But the way it was different now. It wasn't fear. It wasn't suspicion. It was just life, messy, loud, full of little victories. Ava and Ethan were okay. I was okay. And as I stood there, watching the porch light flicker gently in the summer wind, I felt it for the first time in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that comes from safety. From knowing that this time, we were really home.